guys, and welcome back. Over the next few weeks, the videos on this show are going to require some tenon cutting. So on today's show, I'm going to show you the world's easiest table saw jig for cutting tenons. So here's the story. In my shop, I don't cut too many tenons. So up until this point, and I'm surprised it's taken this long, I've never had a need for a tenon cutting jig. So because I don't cut that many, I don't want some big elaborate jig that's going to take me forever to construct. However, I also don't want to cut the tenons without doing it safely. So the first thing we're going to do to cut this tenon jig is we're going to have to rough out our stock. And for that, we're going to need some 3/4 inch plywood, and we're going to need 2 panels measuring 8 inches by 12 inches. I've got the 2 pieces cut, and these are the main panels for the jig, and they're measuring, like I said before, at 8 inches wide, 12 inches long, and this is 3/4 inch ply. We now need to cut some dados in these pieces, and I'm going to go through that with you, but I just want to reiterate what I've said in all my other jig videos, that you need to ensure right from the get-go that before you cut these pieces on your table saw that your blade is at 90 degrees to your table. As well, you need these cuts to be right on. This is what's going to transpose onto your final workpiece. So if this is crooked, so is your final workpiece. So before you carry on any further, just ensure that all 4 corners are square on both pieces, and then we can carry on with the project. We've gone through and checked all 4 corners of both of our main panels, and they're all perfectly square, and that's what we want. We now want to mark for the bottom dado, and what we're going to have here is we're going to have 2 dados that run along the 12-inch length of each of our 8x12 panels. And what you want to do at this point is measure the height of your ripping fence on your table saw. Now for mine is 2 3/4 high, so you want to come above that a fair bit. So I'm actually going to go at 3.5 inches to the bottom of my lower dado. So you just want to, I'm using an Inqua rule. You guys know how much I love these things. You can mark it however you want, but I'm just going to mark that line there at 3.5 inches, and I'm going to mark it on both pieces. And then I just kind of want to see how much clearance I'm going to have with those lines now. So this will actually sit like this over my fence. So I want to take this to my ripping fence and see that this is actually going to clear the fence and that we're going to be fine. And then we're going to move on to setting up the dado blade. So I've got this board propped up here against my fence, and I don't know if you can see my line, which is right along there, but we're looking at roughly 7/8 of an inch clearance from the top of the fence to where that dado is going to be, and that's just perfect for my liking. So now we'll go ahead and set up for the dado blades. What I have here is my Dado Storyboard, and for those of you who don't know what this is, I showcased making one of these on one of my earlier videos, and if you haven't made one yet, all I can say is, what the heck are you waiting for? So I'm using the same 3/4 stock for the pieces, for the cross members, so this is going to be the size of our dado. So with the storyboard, as I show in the video for making it, you just want to test which one it's going to fit in nicely. And for this here, with the 4 large chippers, this is way too loose. This is just sloppy. And with the 3 large and 1 small, it's too tight. So on the other side with the 3 large, 1 small, and 1 large shim, it's still a little tight. So at this point I'm going to go with 3 large, 1 small, and 2 of the .020 shims. And that should give us the perfect size dado for what we require. And if you want more information on this particular jig, check out the video for the Dado blade storyboard. Okay, so I just want to show you guys this here. If you haven't made yourself one of these storyboards, you're really missing out on saving yourself the frustration of setup. You saw how quickly I used the piece of scrap in the storyboard and assessed that if the 4 large is too big and the 3 large and 1 small is too big, or sorry, too small, and the 3 large, 1 small, and the .020 shim is just slightly too small, I made a judgment call and added an extra .020 shim. I set up the dado blade, I set it up one time only, using that setup, and these dados are perfect. One-shot deal. So guys, make yourself a storyboard. Really, save yourself the aggravation. So now that I've got this done, I'm going to move on and I am going to cut the dados that I need in both of these main panels for our jig. The second dado that we want to cut is going to be 3/4 of an inch down from the top of our jig. So I've set the fence up here for 3/4 inch gap, and I'm going to run these through and get another dado at the top of this jig. Something you want to pay attention to when you're doing this, of course, is check and double check to make sure the alignment of your jig that you actually are cutting at the top. It'd be disastrous now to cut your dado and find out that you've got one on the bottom and one on the top, then your jig doesn't work. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these now. We have both of our dados cut that will be the support pieces across the top of our table fence, but we need one more dado, and what this dado will be is it'll be an upright dado on the 8-inch side running parallel with it. We're going to go in about 1.5 inches and we're going to run the same size dado up this side here. And you know, just to make this jig a little more versatile, that I could cut left or right, on the left or the right side of the blade, I'm going to cut it on both back sides. Now you want to make sure that you're on the back side of these panels here. So we want to cut one dado here and another one on the other side on the outside of that board. So we're going to go ahead now and set up and cut those. It's imperative that these cuts be square to your 12-inch side. So you need to make sure that's a perfect 90-degree angle when you're cutting it. All 3 dados are cut in both panels. And what we need to do now is cut these 12-inch pieces that will go between these 2 panels. And what you want to do is you want to measure the width of your ripping fence. Now, I didn't mention earlier, and I probably should have, I've made these dados 1/4 of an inch deep. You can make them whatever you want, but the 1/4 inch, of course, will give great support, still leaving another 1/2 inch on the 3/4 ply for plenty of stability. So either way, what you need now is the piece that will go between your two panels. So it'll go in between here in the dados. So you'll need the width of your fence, in my case 2 inches, plus the depth of each dado. So 1/4 plus 1/4 is 1/2, plus your 2 inches for your fence is 2.5 inches. If you're not good with measurements, and if the fractions mess you up, and you're not really sure what you can do, I know I need 2.5, but go 2 3/4 if you're not 100% sure, and then inch up on it to get a perfect fit. You want it so that when this is all sandwiched together and riding on top of your ripping fence, you want it to be firm yet still smooth, or smoothly sliding. You don't want it to pinch and bind on you. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these pieces for this support at 2.5 inches wide, and in my case 12 inches long. So we've given everything a light sanding, and it's looking pretty good. We've got our initial 2 panels, 8 by 12, with our 2 3/4 dados, one just above the fence line and one about 3/4 inch down from the top. We have our 2 center braces cut at 12 inches long, and in my case 2.5 inches wide. Again, that depends on how wide your fence is, but I've got 2 of these. And I've also cut 2 pieces 12 inches long out of the 3/4 ply, and I've made them 1 inch wide. And these are going to be for our vertical supports. So let's go ahead and put this thing together, and we'll see how it works. So we're going to start off with the first piece, the first panel here, and we'll just put a little bead of glue in there, just like that. We don't need a lot. And another little bead in this one, and we're going to get our cross member pieces put in. So we're just going to line up at the end, and once we get them lined up, I like to use a block of wood and a dead blow hammer just to get it to fit in there nicely. Make sure that you're firmly seated into the bottom, and that looks good. And then we've got this second piece, obviously, and that will go in our second dado. And once again, like I said, I like the mallet with the dead blow, or sorry, the dead blow with a block of wood. Just like that. Looking pretty sexy. Okay, now we need our second one here. And for this, I'll just put a bead of glue on these upright pieces. And it's just a little bead. You don't need a lot. And then we'll take our top piece, line it up here. And again, with our block of wood and our dead blow, just going to make sure that that's all hammered down there like that. Alright, so that looks pretty sexy. And now I'm going to get some clamps. I'm going to clamp this up and let that set for a bit. The glue joint on this jig is not enough on its own to hold this together over a period of time. This is going to take a lot of abuse. So I've drilled and countersunk 6 holes, and I've drilled the pilot holes, and I'm putting in some number 10 by 1.5 inch Robertson screws, and that should assist in holding the jig together perfectly over time. So I'm going to go ahead and continue now to put the rest of these in. This is what our jig looks like at this point in time, and it's basically just an open framed box with some center supports, and this whole assembly rides on your ripping fence. All the screws are in, and it's actually quite solid, quite sturdy. Our last step in assembly is putting our vertical supports. These are the pieces that I cut earlier out of 3/4 ply, 1 inch wide and 12 inches long. And they're going to go inside of these dados here on the 8-inch side. Now, I know you're looking at this saying how high this is up over top of the jig, but that's to help support these higher pieces. So we're going to go ahead on each side and run a bead of glue in the dado, and using our scrap block of wood and the dead blow mallet, we're going to go ahead and glue these in place and clamp them and let them dry up. What I've got here is a 3/4 inch thick piece of walnut, and it's just a piece of scrap. I'm just going to use it to demonstrate how to use the jig. So for this particular demonstration, what we're going to do is a 1 inch deep tenon that will be a 1/4 inch thick on the end of this piece of walnut. So the first thing that you want to do for this particular jig is you want to mark your 1 inch depth of your tenon. So we'll just line it up here and mark 1 inch. Now, whether you use a square or you use an Inca rule like I just did, really doesn't matter at this point in time, as long as you get that one mark there. You then want to rotate your piece 90 degrees, and you're going to want to mark your 1/4 inch tenon. So because the board is 3/4 of an inch thick, if we want a 1/4 inch tenon in the middle, obviously we need to come in 1/4 inch on each side. So although we don't have to, I've marked a 1/4 inch in on each side of this board, and that's nothing more than just to double check measurements and make sure that I still have a 1/4 of an inch left in the middle, and I do. And I'll just bring this up so you can see these markings. There are the two on the edge of the board, and of course the 1 inch on the end. Now, if you have several tenons to cut like this, you only have to mark the one board, because once you get the jig set up, away you go, it's done. So we're going to go over to the table saw now, and I'm going to show you how to set up the jig to cut this tenon. Well, we've placed the jig on top of our ripping fence, and you can see here it slides quite nicely, but yet there's no play. You don't hear the rattle as you're going across the fence. That's because it's the right size. First thing you want to do is you just want to make sure that your upright support is 90 degrees to your table. That's imperative. So the whole purpose of these is to keep your piece at 90 degrees to your table saw. So once you've got that, you know you're good to go. And now we can move on to the next step. Now that we've confirmed that our upright support is 90 degrees to the table, you want to take your stock, and with your 1 inch line facing out towards the blade, you want to clamp this piece up against your vertical fence. And don't just use the one clamp. If you can, use two. But you don't want to try to hold this by hand, I promise you. Once you get this in place, you want to slide it forward to come to your blade, and you want to raise your blade up until it meets that 1 inch line. Just like that. And when it meets the 1 inch line, lock your blade in place so that you know that that's the height that you will be cutting. Once you get that done, it's time to set your fence. And what you want to do is you want to set your fence so that your blade is cutting only that outside 1/4 of an inch off. So we'll just line it up here with this tooth. just like that. And when we get it there, we'll lock our fence down. And I'm going to show you now how to go ahead and cut this tenon. Your first step is that you want to run this board through the blade all the way through, completing the cut. Once you get that done, you know this is set up correctly. Unclamp your piece, reclamp it in against your stop, and run it through again. And we'll just go through that right now. The next step now, once you have all of your cuts made, and it should look something like this at this point in time. It'll be 1 inch deep, as you can see that. It's a 1/4 inch material left inside. It's bang on. Next thing you want to do is you want to get your miter fence. Set it at 90 degrees. You want to set your stop so that you will cut off this little end tail. So you want the blade to cut at 1 inch, and you want the blade height to be just above whatever is left of this material. So I've got this set up, and I'll go ahead and cut those and show you what it looks like. There you have it. World's easiest tenoning jig. It doesn't take long to make, but it does do a good job. Really nice tenons. We're looking at from this, nothing special, plain old board, to this. Cut cleanly, and more importantly, cut safely using this or this. So guys, give it a try. It's really easy, simple to do, and it'll make cutting your tenons a heck of a lot safer. You could also use this for doing half lap joints, and it makes that setup and that whole process a lot safer and a lot easier as well. Just remember, one thing I forgot in the video when I was cutting these tenons through the jig this way is I really should have had my ripping blade in. And I forgot to change it, and I have my crosscut blade in, and the saw worked a little harder than what it should have. So proper blade for the proper type of cut, guys. Guys, thanks for watching. Try it yourself. World's easiest tenon cutting jig for your table saw. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week with yet another woodworking video.